Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today's show, The Don. President Trump's been showing he's the godfather of world politics in his week-long European tour. He's been keeping his friends close but his enemies closer in Helsinki, where he met Vladimir Putin, a meeting he's still having to defend. Before that summit, he stabbed Theresa May in the back while in London. But thankfully, that was all cleared up as fake news. And he's been demanding protection money from his NATO allies. Time to pay up, Europe, he said. Or would you rather have Putin running the neighborhood? Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus, the man who loves to shock his allies and flatter his adversaries. It's Donald Trump. We're looking at his bruising tour of Europe, which ended with a controversial summit with Vladimir Putin. Well, today we're joined by a former Kremlin advisor, Alexander Nekrassov, who says the Western media got it appallingly wrong and the meeting went pretty well. Drew Liquerman is a member of Trump's party and generally supports the president, but concedes he did make a big mistake in Helsinki. And Andre Walker, a right-wing journalist who can give us the inside story on how Trump handled the press. So now we're all gathered and together, let's watch our first report on Trump and Putin's relationship, a mini-movie we're calling The Two Dons.
Said some very good things about me. People say, oh, Trump's going to be weak with Putin because Putin is saying nice things about me. Okay, wouldn't it be great if we actually got along with Russia? Am I wrong in saying that? Wouldn't it be great?
Claims of alleged Trump-Russia collusion are topping the news agenda yet again.
It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. That is a very big deal.
Does anyone seriously think Russia can somehow influence the choice of the US people? Is the US some kind of banana republic?
I had a call with President Putin.
Do not congratulate Putin. Wait, that's a note to me, okay?
And congratulated him on the victory, his electoral victory.
First step, a big congratulations to Vladimir Putin.
You think you're going to get along with President Putin at that meeting? Could you just tell us, why do you think that? Is there something you admire about him?
Well, he's a competitor. He's been very nice to me the times I've met him. I've been nice to him. He's a competitor. You know, somebody was saying, is he an enemy? No, he's not my enemy. Is he a friend? No, I don't know him well enough.
Russian intelligence officers indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller for cyber attacks.
The indictment charges 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election.
This was an opportunity for our president to get up there on stage and look Vladimir Putin in the eye and say, you're not going to mess with us again. But he didn't.
Would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
All I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
It seemed to almost everyone who was watching, the President of the United States was siding with Putin, was taking the word of this former KGB spy over his own U.S. intelligence agencies.
Obscene and disgraceful.
Humiliatingly embarrassing.
It's one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president.
It's beneath the conduct of American presidents, not who we are.
That was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Well, there it is, the two dons. Let's go to Alexander Nekrassov, who used to be a Kremlin advisor. Alexander, a bit of a childish question, perhaps, but it's important. When these two men meet, who is the boss of bosses?
Well, I think that these two men treat each other with respect. I think what we have witnessed during that summit, or especially after the summit, is that the Western media is now living in some la-la land of its own, and it wants the whole world to to act according to that world that the Western media has created. And when we saw those journalists, Western journalists, at that press conference behaving like spoiled school children, and were actually, you know, with trembling voices talking to their own president and expecting him, of all things, to say, yes, there was collusion, and yes, I won the election because of the Russians.
I don't know what question you thought I asked you, Alexander. I said, out of these two men, who's the boss?
Well, I don't see the boss there.
You don't see a boss there. All right, fine. You don't see a boss there. Alexander, thank you. We're going to come back to you. Hope I haven't upset you. You look a little angry now. Let me ask you, Drew, who's the boss out of these two when they meet?
Well, I would hope that Donald Trump's the boss, but I think that they just regard each other on equal footing as leaders of powerful countries and, you know, work towards bettering our countries and, you know, getting to a solution of fixing
you may hope that, but Forbes puts Putin in at #2 now as the second most powerful man in the world. Xi Jinping's #1. Who knows? So you just want it to be Trump, but we don't know who's the boss in that situation when they sit down together?
Well, I've said I hope he does. It's behind closed doors, but, you know, look at Trump's gesture when he meets with, you know, Canadian leaders, North Korean leaders, his handshake, his body tone. He always comes off like he...
Yeah, but it's not just body language, is it? I'm talking about politics here. I mean, look, they've both got roughly the same number of nuclear weapons. Putin's got a few more, actually. Maybe they're a bit older. But I'm talking about politics here. Who needs more? Who needs more?
I think coming off the trip where he's getting countries, you know, he's pressuring countries to take a harder stand on Russia. I think he's coming into this meeting as the boss. You know, he's coming into this meeting as more aggressive, I believe. You know, he's coming in at a higher footing.
Alexander, just one more message from you.
Well, I don't understand why we're comparing who is the boss, especially as Trump asked for that meeting. Don't forget, Trump is on a campaign trail. Trump has the elections in November. Everything he says and does is targeted at the American voters. He doesn't care what Europe thinks. He doesn't care what Russia thinks. He cares what his voters think. He needs a victory in November. He needs to control the Senate and the House.
Are you relieved, Alexander, to see a president who isn't pandering to the usual narrative that Russia is our enemy and I've been tough with him? Does that you know, that's quite a striking feature.
Well, I think he's a pragmatic president. I think everybody is tired of that liberal rubbish that has been peddled by Obama and the European leaders, Western European leaders. All these summits that we saw before Trump were boring, were predictable. Everything was decided beforehand. Everybody agreed with each other. Nothing was decided. Nothing worked. Wars were raging everywhere. And I think at last people started to wake up. And those European leaders, I was enjoying how they were angry with Trump. Because
we all were. We're going to come to that a bit later, actually. Drew, I want to come back to you quickly. Alexander mentioned the elections coming up. Isn't it a bit of a risk for Donald Trump to be as cozy as he is with Putin? I mean, nobody's saying he's went too far. Well, actually, a lot of people are saying that. But we're not saying that here in the Nexus. But isn't it a risk for Donald Trump to look so close to Putin when he's got his own people about to go to the polls?
Right. I mean, look, I reject the notion that Trump has been close to Putin. You know, I can list off the long list of things he's done to anger Putin, pulling out of the Iran deal, how many Russian mercenaries have been killed by the U.S. in Syria, bombing air bases with Russian jets on it. So, look, Trump has not done anything to make Putin's life easier. But that being said, I think Trump did misspeak. He blew a good opportunity at the press conference, and, you know, I think that's what everyone in the media wants to focus about. We're not actually talking about how Trump has clamped down on Russia, what he's done with Russia. All we want to do is talk about a press conference.
To add to your list, you would probably say that he also expelled 60 Russian diplomats after the poisoning in the United Kingdom, and that he also authorized the sale of deadly weapons to Ukraine, where Obama was just sending socks and blankets and so on. You mentioned that he misspoke. Of course, when he got back to the United States, he came into a hail of criticism from his own side, including people like Newt Gingrich, who said he should never have said that he couldn't see any reason why Russia wouldn't interfere with the US election. So he issued this retraction, or was it a correction? Let's have a listen.
In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So, just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't.
Let's go back to Drew. Drew, I know you worked or have worked with some of the very senior people in the Republican Party. Are they now satisfied by Trump's correction?
Well, yeah, and I think they are. And I think a lot of people also realize it's very confusing. There's two investigations going on right now. The one that says Trump colluded with Russia, which is a total ridiculous witch hunt that, that is absurd. And then there's the second investigation that Russia meddled in the U.S. elections, whether it be sponsoring Facebook ads, the DNC servers, that are completely different.
Which all the intelligence agencies agree that they did do. Russia did meddle in the investigation, but there's no proof yet that they colluded with any Americans. I want to come to Andre Walker now. Andre, you've got your journalist ear on. I'm sorry, I need your help with this one. Let's replay the original statement by Donald Trump, and you tell me what he really meant. Have a listen.
President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
There you go. An N, an apostrophe, and a T. You tell me, what did he really mean at that press conference in Helsinki? Would or wouldn't?
Hey, look, I'm pretty supportive of Donald Trump generally, but I think we all know that he didn't misspeak. I think the problem is what Drew just talked to a second ago, which is the fact that these two investigations effectively, in most people's minds, are merging into one. So I think that Donald Trump thinks that the minute that anybody accuses Vladimir Putin of meddling in the election, that automatically equals Donald Trump's collusion with Vladimir Putin. And those two, of course, are not the same thing. There is a widespread theory that in fact Vladimir Putin simply meddled in order to toxify and destabilize the American political system, which to an extent has probably worked. But it did make me laugh a second ago with Alexander Nekrassov talking about how journalists were quaking in their boots. Well, of course, had this been Russian journalists in Moscow, they would have had good reason to quake in the boots, because Vladimir Putin threatens, murders and discriminates against journalists on a regular basis. He is, after all, a fascist leader, a dictator and a bully, and somebody who has no place in the civilized world.
Alexander, I better let you have a rebuttal there.
Well, I don't even know how to respond to such cheap propaganda, because, Western hacks need to understand something. They need to stop being propagandists. They need to report news. They need to stop lying all the time. They need to distract attention from their own terrible politicians who lie to their people. And by the way, about these intelligence agencies in America, well, they've lied a lot, didn't they, in the past? Iraq, Libya, and so on and so on. And suddenly they're all offended. Oh, we're offended. The president doubts what we're telling him. Excuse me. That they were lying all the time in the past, all the time. So now they're offended.
I think what does strike me is, if you look at the Edward Snowden and the WikiLeaks thing, I think the problem with that is clearly the activities of the Kremlin are far worse than what's going on in America. But because of Edward Snowden, because the only confidential details on either side have been leaked by the Americans, it gives Vladimir Putin the ability to dishonestly claim that the CIA is as bad as the FSB, which is, of course, utter nonsense.
I don't know. What's interesting, Alexander, is that, of course, the Western media would usually have a big go at the America's intelligence agencies, but when Donald Trump implies that they can't be trusted, perhaps fully, then they go at him.
Well, I think the Western media has discredited itself in this century, especially after the Iraq War, to an extent that I meet Western people all the time who say to me, we no longer believe the newspapers on television. That's it.
Now, before seeing Putin, Trump had been enjoying a nice round of golf at his own course in Scotland. Some rather negative people, he might say, turned up at Turnberry to boo him. But he played on regardless, and reportedly the US State Department, which arranges the president's trip overseas, paid about $77,000 to Trump's own course ahead of that visit. Well, that's reportedly, of course. Before that, he'd enjoyed a fancy dinner with the Prime Minister, Theresa May, at Blenheim Palace, or the birthplace of one of Trump's heroes, Winston Churchill. But that evening, the knives were out, and not just to cut through the lovely roast beef they were enjoying and potatoes. Trump's explosive interview with the Sun newspaper hit the headlines like a knife in the PM's back. Amongst other things, Trump commented on how Prime Minister Theresa May had been handling Brexit negotiations, saying, "I actually told Theresa May how to do it, but she didn't agree. She didn't listen to me. She wanted to go a different route." Trump also warned May that her Brexit plan would probably kill any future trade deal with the United States. Now, the next day, in front of Mrs. May, he contextualized his comments, calling his own bombshell interview fake news.
I didn't criticize the Prime Minister. I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. And unfortunately, there was a story that was done, which was, generally fine, but it didn't put in what I said about the Prime Minister. And I said tremendous things. And fortunately, we tend to record stories now, so we have it for your enjoyment if you'd like it. But we record when we deal with reporters. It's called fake news. I said to that paper, The Sun, and they seem like two very nice people, but I said that Theresa May is one of them's nice, but I said,
she said, sitting here.
Oh, good. Where is that person? Where? Did I say nice things about Theresa May, please? Oh, good. Okay. If you reported them, that's good. Okay. Where? On the internet? I said very good things. Thank you very much for saying that. No, I said very good things about her. I didn't think they put it in, but that's all right. They didn't put it in the headline. I wish they put that in the headline. That's one of those things.
Andre, this is your speciality. You're a fellow British journalist. What do you make of this? He calls it fake news, but the articles seem to reflect what he said okay.
Yeah, and I suppose this was one of the more gentle allegations of fake news that we've ever heard. So essentially what it appears to be, certainly from my watching of the press conference, that Donald Trump felt that he'd said so many nice things about Theresa May. The article should have been overwhelmingly nice about her. However, I'm with the Sun on this. I think actually Donald Trump was right and the Sun were right to report that clearly there is a risk with the Chequers deal, and actually that does restrict the ability of the US to have a free trade deal. And also, I have to say, this suggestion that came out from the Prime Minister later that Donald Trump had said we should sue the European Union. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he's adopting a very aggressive stance. And frankly, it just seems that the Prime Minister is so wishy-washy on the Brexit negotiations that it would do no harm to adopt some of Donald Trump's stick and no carrot approach.
Well, that's the thing, Andre. I mean, of course, you can say a heck of a lot of nice things, but on Brexit, I mean, that's the really important thing for Theresa May at the moment. He knew when he said a deal like the one you've hashed out, Mrs. May, is not something we can work with, would be incredibly damaging. I can't ask you why do it, God only knows, but I have to ask you, what is it about the Brexit deal that Trump doesn't like?
Well, the problem with the Brexit deal is that Donald Trump has always been supportive of hard Brexit. Always remember something. Donald Trump saw the Brexit referendum as a prelude to his own election as president. So he sees this as part of the same effort of kind of the Western world or the English-speaking world, depending on which way you look at it, retaking control from the swamp that is DC and Westminster. And so obviously he was always going to advocate the hardest of hard Brexits.
Drew, I need you to be brutally honest with me now. Does President Trump and his administration want to see the European Union being dismantled?
Well, look, I don't know for sure about that one, but I could tell you that the U.S. has serious problems with the European Union. I mean, the European Union, look, the easiest way to put it is it's a bunch of socialist social welfare states that then are using the U.S. as their own socialist social welfare state, while also ripping us off on tariffs. So I think that really does upset Trump that, we're essentially footing the bill for their defense. And, at the same time, they have higher tariffs on our goods than we do on theirs. So
okay.
I think it...
Drew, thank you for that. Well, let's get back to our Godfather theme now. And the Don was at his shocking best during the NATO summit in Brussels, where he demanded more protection money. Or to put it more seriously, where he demanded that European countries, especially Germany, paid their fair share into NATO, 2% of GDP. It's something the Don has been angry about for a very long time now.
We defend the whole world. All you have to do, and we want to be nice. Somebody said, oh, that's like the mafia defense. I said, don't worry about it, okay? The mafia is not so stupid.
I think it's time
to give these NATO leaders a shakedown. The protection money isn't rolling in as it should. A few years back, they all agreed to pay 2% of GDP, while only 5 have kept up their payments.
I'm going to tell NATO, you got to start paying your bills. The United States is not going to take care of everything.
Especially those Germans. Look at her. She has a rich economy, but she pays me no respect.
And I said, you know, Angela, I can't guarantee it, but we're protecting you, and it means a lot more to you than protecting us, because I don't know how much protection we get by protecting you.
I'll tell you what I'm telling everyone. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If I have to, maybe I even walk away from NATO. After World War II, 12 families, so to speak, came together to form NATO, to protect ourselves against Russia. And now there's 29 members, from Europe to North America, and they all pay to be protected from this guy. He's got a bad reputation, and his tactics are making my friends nervous. It was his goons who helped take over Crimea, and his people are suspected of poisoning a former spy in the United Kingdom. And what about these guys? A shady network of underground hackers doing his dirty work. They even say he's got a dossier on me, but I doubt it. Look, I had a private meeting with him this week. It went great. I like to call him the gas man because he supplies the neighborhood with so much energy. I want a piece of that action.
But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO.
The way I see it, we could keep this NATO thing going. But if they don't keep up the payments, I'm gonna make them an offer they can't refuse.
Let me go to Andre Walker first. Andre, Donald Trump's managed to do something that his predecessors never managed but wanted to do, which was to get the NATO members to pay up. That's quite an achievement.
It is, without doubt, a huge achievement. And his fundamental point was absolutely right. It's crazy that Germany has consistently refused to spend money on its national defence and insisted the Americans picked up the bill. And Donald Trump was absolutely right. At the same time as they're doing a deal with gas from the Kremlin. Funnily enough, Donald Trump is not just having a go at NATO. Always remember, he made exactly the same point about South Korea. Not that he wasn't willing to defend South Korea, but he just didn't understand why this comparatively wealthy country was unable or unwilling to give money towards its own national defence.
Alexander, if I could come to you. People say that Trump is cozying up to Putin and so on. I want to talk about energy. He was very clear with the Germans. Why are you building this huge pipeline with Russia when you could be taking our gas and oil? Is this something that the Kremlin is genuinely worried about, or is there some sort of deal being hatched behind closed doors?
Well, first of all, I think that Donald Trump was talking about Germany in a way that he was ridiculing all these people in Europe who were trying to present him as Putin's agent. He simply turned the tables around and said, how would you like me to say to Germany that Germany totally depends on Russia? Also absurd. It's the same absurd. It's the theater of absurd. And I think, you know, it's time for the Western Alliance to really stop these games and start really discussing things seriously.
Just on the question of energy, though, you know, energy is something that Russia's economy really relies on. So if Trump wants a big slice of that, is Putin worried?
Well, first of all, energy was provided by the Soviet Union during the Cold War to the West, so that you know. So that doesn't mean anything at all. I mean, energy is energy, and this is going to continue forever, and Russia will be supplying Europe for the next couple of decades, trust me. That's going to continue. The point here is political struggle, which is going on between Western countries, especially in Washington. That political struggle suddenly spread out of Washington across the world. And I think we are seeing anarchy in Washington, to be honest with you. When intelligence agencies go against their own president, you know, that reminds me of the KGB when it lost control under Stalin at some point, and he had to really go after them. So, excuse me, we are seeing mayhem in Washington and mayhem in Western Europe.
Okay.
So to talk about some sort of a policy is absurd.
All right, Alexander, something a little amusing to lighten the tone, unless you think nuclear war is awful, which most of us do. Oh, look what happens when you get your words all mixed up. Here's Kim Jong-un. I meant wouldn't denuclearize. Yeah, it can happen to the best of us. Well, that is all we have time for. Just want to thank our guests. Andre Walker, thank you. Drew Liquerman, appreciate it. And Alexander Nekrassov, thank you for your analysis as well. That's all we have time for. You can watch our show online on our YouTube channel, including this episode and the previous ones. But for now, thank you, and see you next week.